Today we're talking with Maria Alfaro. Maria is a first generation Salvadoran American from Yonkers, New York. She's a speaker, leader, and passionate change maker in her community. She's the founder and president of a nonprofit organization, Que Paso Latinx. Her mission is to destigmatize mental health through healing conversation and Latinx culture by educating and empowering the community. Maria holds a bachelor in behavioral science and a master in organizational leadership. So thank you, Maria, for being, with us today. Today is actually the first episode of a series that we're going to have all the month of May, which is mental health series. So thank you, Maria, for everything. Thank you for accepting first of being with me today, and it's an honor to have you here.
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited to come on and share and talk about mental health with everyone.
Yes. So let's start first with like the basics, like we had said it before, and then like most likely most of our listeners know that mental health is not something that is talked about much in our community and in general. So for introduction on mental health, what is mental health and why is important to talk about it?
Okay, so I mean, in a nutshell, mental health is us taking care of our minds. So that's our emotional, our psychological, and our social well being. So these are the things that impact how we think, how we behave, and most of all, how we feel. And naturally, these are the things that we hold inside. And unlike physical illness, mental
Mm-hmm.
health, mental illness happens in our minds, right? So these are the things
Mm-hmm.
that, this is the reason why it's important to talk about it because it happens in our minds, which, unlike physical illness,
Mm-hmm.
many times you can't see what someone's going through emotionally,
Mm-hmm.
psychologically, because it happens inside. And so if we talk about these things that we all go through them because we all have a
Mm-hmm.
mind, we all have feelings, emotions. We're all human, so we all go through these struggles. Whether someone may go through them less severe than others may, but we all go through mental
Mm-hmm.
battles. So it's important to talk about it because the more we speak about it and have it out there in the open, the more others are able to relate to that struggle because it's a struggle because of the stigmas that have or that still exist and that have existed.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we talk about it, the less that stigma will stand because it'll just become something that's
Mm-hmm.
normal, right? It'll become just like I
Mm-hmm.
see. So like here in my hometown of Yonkers, I see um, they host like health fairs, right? And then you look for
Mm-hmm.
anything related to mental health and you don't see it. And that's the problem. The problem
Mm-hmm.
is that mental health should be held in the same light as physical health because they go hand in hand. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
more we talk about that and the more we normalize that, the stigma will start to go away. So that's one of a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of the reason why I think it's important to open up and talk about our mental health, our mental struggles.
Yeah, definitely. And like it's really true how you say like it should be treated equally like the physical health. And also like I was telling you before like recording like there's many others who like might not be familiar with like, oh, okay, what is actual mental health, because we don't take in consideration that side of us, we're like, it's just like, oh well, I went through and that's it. It's not like I went through and that's it. It's like that will, if it's not impacting you right now, it might impact you years later, and that's when you're going to see the change, and that's when you're going to what's it called, realize it, that it might just not have been just on a
Yes,
minor thing. So
absolutely.
so for me, like mental health, like it hasn't been introduced in my life for like a long time, and this is something I talked to you
Mhm.
before. That's probably like 2 to 3 years max, I'll say. um so imagine, and that was me googling,
Mhm.
you know or like, why do I feel this way, you know what I mean, like googling, or like seeing a picture on Instagram, or seeing like something in Facebook that describes, and that might have like the mind have been like, oh, that's how I feeling, like what is this and that's going. So like the accessibility and the way of how like conversation goes about is not out there, and this is what I told you, like this is like the main point that I want to create this series, because it's like, well, I'm not even talking just from my point, but like I know others have like might feel the same way, that we don't have those type of conversation or those type of what it is, or it might have had like um a bad experience with something, in this case like with a therapist, or that they don't want to start talking about the, you know what is mental health and what is it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that happens a lot of the times because of the stigmas that exist within our
Mm-hmm.
community, right? Which are go back to just generations, because it ends up being
Mm-hmm.
where the generation before us thought this way, and the generation before that, and it just trickles down to us, and here we are, right? And so the stigmas like la ropa sucia, no se lava en casa ajena,
Se
yeah,
la ven
yeah,
casa.
and
Uh-huh.
there's that,
Uh-huh.
right? Just so like the dirty laundry, you don't wash it in someone else's house, like a stranger's house.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to mental health, that's like you don't go and talk about the business that or anything that happens in your household afuera de la casa.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's like we need that because and the thing is it's to do it not with the intentions of saying, "Oh, this and this happened to me. Esto me pasa, o me siento así. Like I feel
Mm-hmm.
this way." No, it's if you do it in like in an empowering and in a healing way, then that
Mm-hmm.
makes the difference. So there's
Mm-hmm.
that stigma. There's also the stigmas around like I've heard like I know growing up for me it was like when oh ella se siente no le pasa nada solo se siente son los nervios. And
Mm-hmm.
but in reality that's like anxiety a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yep.
reason that's a stigma is because anxiety is real, right? We're talking about mental health. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
our heads, which is another stigma that people like to think, oh no, so
Mm-hmm.
it's all in your head. And if we're able to if those around us are able to accept that that's true and it's not just ella apareciendo de
Mm-hmm.
los nervios or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
then we feel more comfortable reaching out for help to manage that anxiety. And if we
Mm-hmm.
can manage that anxiety, or whether it be anxiety, depression, uh, panic attacks, whatever that may be, or whatever it looks like to each of us,
Mm-hmm.
then if we're able to manage it, we are able to live our lives, more at peace, more at ease, because
Mm-hmm.
we can control our minds through that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's really all mental health is. That's really all it is, being able to manage our minds and our behaviors and our thoughts, which are influenced by so many different things. Because there's
Mm-hmm.
the biological component, because mental health, mental illness, mental conditions, um, they're both they can be inherited through either your genes, whether mental illness or mental conditions exist in your family. And a lot of the times, even if it does exist within your family, a lot of the times it has to do with the environmental. So, like if you've gone through traumatic experiences, abuse of any sort, and these are the things that impact our mental health. And so, like I said, it's just mental health is just about being able to manage day to day, just like we do physically, right? We go to the
Mm-hmm.
doctor. We're supposed to go to the doctor every year for a physical, right? It's the same thing with our
Mm-hmm.
mental. The same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, but in this case they don't see it
Right,
as it,
right.
that it needs to be checked up. Yeah, and then it's true how you said, like, there's the phrase of, like, los trapitos del, like se lavan en la casa, no se lavan en ropa ajena. But I also have heard like the sacaron los trapitos al sol. I think that's another one that
Uh-huh.
I've heard, but I don't think it's really true. I don't know, maybe. um, But one of the biggest one that I have heard, and this is, it goes to my second question, is about being crazy. It's like, the title, like in español sería estás loco, um, or loca, and then just crazy. How when someone goes to seek help, for example. And the reason why I brought this question is because when, um, and many of the listeners who have listened to the episodes a long time and know that my parents got divorced, so that was the reason I migrated. But during that process before migrating, my mom did put me with a therapist because I was la consentida de papi, right? So that change in my life, of course, it hurt me, and I never, I don't know. I think until today I realized like the effect that, like, truly the effect that had in my life. But I did went to a therapist, and I had the worst experience ever.
Oh no.
It was like, every time I went, she would make me. I felt like she was a propósito hacerme llorar, and I didn't want to keep crying. She would like put me to close my eyes and imagine my dad, but I wanted to not imagine my dad, if that
Oh
makes
yeah.
sense. Just because I wanted to not like forget him, because I mean it's my dad, but it was like I want to heal the space that he left in my life, you know. But every time I'll go, I clearly remember the day that like she made me cry, and she's like, "Oh, remember that dad is like that is here," and I just cry and cry because I didn't want to, and like she had me like in the office, and I was like, and I remember getting out of my like the office, and I went to my mom, and I was like, I don't want to go back. And then my mom was like, what? No, because she's making me cry. And I'm like, hey, I'm very sentimental, but I'm like, in the face that, like, cositas me hacen llorar y me pongo like sad, but like I was like, in the case, because of how society have mentalized myself, I was like, I'm not crazy. Why I don't want to be here? Why is she making me cry? I know you're putting me here because of my, like my dad left, but I don't, I don't want to come here every single week, so to someone to remind me that my dad left.
Right.
And that's why I never went back. So I wanted to ask you that, like, why when we talk about, well, first of all, why when we talk about mental health in our houses, um is never is always categorized like crazy, or sometimes we don't talk about. And like I said, that's a like a very personal experience that I went through, and I was like, I don't want to go. So that's why, like, I every time, like, I I think about therapists, growing up. That's why I thought, like, oh, I'm gonna go there and they're going to make me remember what I want to forget.
Oh no.
So like, if I don't know how, like, if the question makes
Hmm.
sense, but
No,
yeah.
no, no. I get it. I get it. And I'm so sorry to hear that you had that terrible experience with therapy. Um,
Mhm.
because it shouldn't be, that traumatic. I mean, in my
Yeah.
personal opinion, I feel
Yeah.
like healing looks so different for everybody, right? So,
Mhm.
I mean, if at the moment you didn't want to cry, maybe your therapist should have
Mhm.
like. I mean, I'm not a therapist, so I can't say, but I mean,
Mhm.
anyone just common sense, you would think that someone would like try something different, right? Because if that's
Mhm.
not what you're,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel right to you at the
Mhm.
moment. But and
Mhm.
yeah, healing looks different for everyone. So, but your question, yeah. So like seeming, que la persona está loco o loca si parecen de la salud
Mhm.
mental or if they have like a mental condition, right? So for me,
Mhm.
that um, first, I think that that exists because
Mhm.
within not just the Central American community, but also I think just within a lot of communities of color,
Mhm.
um, there tends to be that we don't want to appear weak, right? We have to be like strong,
Mm.
and
Strong.
that's something amongst men and women. Um, and I've
Mhm.
seen it, growing up. I've seen it within my family, and I feel like uh, that has a lot to do with that stigma of like
Mhm.
seeming crazy or seeming like oh you or seeming weak where you can't like you can't handle this
Mhm.
that's and you're stressed out, you're weak because you can't deal
Mhm.
with all of this. When in reality, that's not normal. A lot of us within
Mhm.
the Central American community, the Latinx community, a lot of us come from parents who work hard, and we work hard, right? It's what we've
Mhm.
taught. It's what we're built on. And
Yeah.
just the same, we have to take care of ourselves. And that's really what it boils
Mhm.
down to. Like I was saying at the beginning, being able to find ways to cope, to release stress, positive ways. This is
Mhm.
all what these this is all what mental health is about. And if we're able to
Mhm.
find, and this is why also it's so important to talk about it, because if we're able to find these
Mhm.
ways to manage day to day, the small things that we can do, like earlier we were talking about dancing, right? Salsa dancing.
Mhm.
So these
Yeah.
those small things that we can do, even just waking up in the morning and like opening the curtain and letting in the sun and just intentionally letting it sit there and like you absorb it, though these
Mhm.
are things that are not spoken about and not talked about in a light to intentionally and purposely take care of ourselves because we're
Mhm.
so busy,
Mhm.
working. We have to keep
Mhm.
going, en la lucha, siguiendo, trabajando and taking
Mhm.
care of our families, our parents. So
Mhm.
with regards to that, like appearing crazy, um, I'll tell you, for me, that personally, that has to do um, with the reason why, with the founding story behind Que Paso Latinx.
Mhm.
So I'll talk a little bit about that,
Mhm.
but it goes hand in hand. So my mom, she's been bipolar since the age of 10. So she's battled with this disorder her
Mhm.
whole life. And so for those of who don't know what bipolar disorder is, it's a mental condition in which a person's mood fluctuates from, they go through episodes of like really deep depressions to very
Mhm.
intense manic highs in their emotions.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit of a roller
Mhm.
coaster, and with medications, it can be managed, and people can live,
Mhm.
normal, very normal lives. And so, but with my mom, growing up, I never knew that she had this condition. And so there were times
Mhm.
where she would go into the psychiatric hospital because there were times where she would
Mhm.
go through the manic high, which means that she would when they go through these periods, these episodes, they deal with behaviors such as feeling like that they can accomplish like anything in the world, sort of like, I'm not sure if you saw when Kanye West went on like a rant, and he when he was running, he ran for president.
Oh yeah.
So that
Mhm.
video, um I highlighted that video because he wasn't, I mean, he's bipolar also. And so that was him going
Mhm.
through a manic episode because he doesn't take medications, from what I heard at that time. But that
Mhm.
was like the perfect example of a manic episode because he was like running for president. He felt like he could take over the world. And he was like saying, he started crying during that. And that really just highlighted the
Mhm.
bipolar um, at that moment. And so with my mom, I didn't know this growing up. So when she'd go through these episodes,
Mhm.
she would say, just like Kanye West, he said something about like them wanting to abort their first child or something like that during that rant. And,
Mhm.
things that he probably wouldn't
Mhm.
have said, if he wasn't going through this. So a
Yeah.
lot of the times, hurtful things can come
Mhm.
out of it. And so growing up, when my mom would go through these episodes and we got her the help she needed. She would go to a psych hospital maybe for a few
Mhm.
weeks, and she'd relax her mind. They'd adjust her medications, and she'd be fine. But going through this, growing up, this happened very very often, maybe every other year or so, maybe a little more. And
Mhm.
I didn't understand it because I didn't know. We just knew she was
Mhm.
going to the
Yeah.
hospital. Y me decían que mami estaba enferma. And now I look back at it, I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
sí, mami estaba enferma. Pero, I thought that she was sick maybe physically, because I didn't know that we were
Mhm.
going to the psych hospital. And
Mhm.
because we weren't allowed to go in because we were underage at that point, and so we
Mhm.
waited in the waiting area. So we didn't know any better, right? And I guess looking back
Mhm.
now and looking at my dad and mi abuela, who would just tell us que mami estaba enferma, they did it. Obviously, how do you explain something like that to a child, at the time?
Mhm.
So, but this led me to um, wanting to learn about her condition when I was 16 years old and in high school. And it was through
Mhm.
a program at my high school. It was a scientific research program. And they allowed us to pick a topic of choice. And we were going to read journal articles about it throughout my 3 years in the program. And so I selected to read about
Mhm.
mental conditions. And I have this whole binder, like this thick, and I still have it till this day, full of journal articles around mental conditions. And so this really helped me
Mm.
learn not just about mental conditions, not just about bipolar disorder, about my mom. It helped me better understand her behaviors. And it really like
Mhm.
healed my whole life because I grew up
Mhm.
people, saying, "Oh, mommy está," like people outside of like our family who didn't understand. It was like, "Oh, ella está loca," when she'd have these erratic
Mhm.
and behaviors that were just
Mhm.
simply a part of her condition. "Oh, ella está
Mhm.
loca, no le hagan caso, blah blah blah." Es que no lo
Mhm.
entendía, and just like I didn't understand it,
Mhm.
right, growing up. And
Mhm.
so that stigma, like I've seen it growing up through her, but through the research
Mhm.
and through, so that in high school, going back to that sparked my passion to learn about mental health. And so that's when I went to
Mhm.
college to study behavioral sciences, and I learned a little more, right? But it's
Mhm.
definitely it definitely really stands in the Latino community, Latinx community, that
Mhm.
stigma. And I've seen, like I
Mhm.
said, I've seen it firsthand growing up. But I do know that we can also educate ourselves and learn about it little by little to slowly
Mhm.
eliminate that. Because like earlier, before we
Mhm.
started us recording, like I said,
Mhm.
it's it wasn't until so high school I learned a little bit, and then went off to college I learned a little bit more. And so it wasn't really up until like a few years ago where I was really able to see and understand my mother's condition, and really really learn
Okay.
um, fully the depth of her condition. And so that
Mhm.
helped me so much. That helped me so much, and it's helped those in my family understand. It's helped my dad understand.
Okay.
And it's really and these are like the ways that we can help, like, and eliminate the stigma.
Mhm. Yeah. And then, how's your mom doing now?
She's good. I feel like
Okay.
through me becoming knowledgeable and learning more about mental health in general. And so it's me and my younger sister, and I've been able to help my younger sister and my dad understand more,
Mhm.
and even her siblings. She's been able to feel so much more supported, and so much more
Mhm.
seen, because she didn't feel that growing up. And I because she's told me. And so now that we understand, now she just feels like, wow, like I'm understood for once. And
Mhm.
nobody now associates the behaviors that come from her condition with her. So it's like
Mhm.
it's her condition, and we know that that's something out of her control. And then there's
Okay.
mommy, the jokester woman with the
Mhm.
huge heart, and that's her. And that's always,
Mhm.
that's always her. But sometimes that's just what happens. Just like with physical
Mhm.
illness, right? There it's the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, what is very, like, I mean, the story of how you got involved is like from your mom, and trying to learn more about her conditions and everything. I think it's very like important how you said like, oh, then now you can help your family, understand, because I feel like nowadays in the household, not everybody can go and research and read all the paper and become knowledgeable about mental health in order to help, because it might be in one household that it might be a person with the same bipolar behavior just like your mom, but they're not understood. And I'm glad that your mom now feels that seen, feels like this understood, and maybe the relationship has come to better, because I mean I have never lived with someone and with a bipolar
Yeah,
disorder.
yeah.
I think that's the name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know what the like relacion
Sí, sí, sí.
is when it comes to those stages. So I feel like now knowing, like hearing you talking how learning about it have helped you and your family, I know that. And I mean we should all know that once we start talking more about mental health and then helping those who need it, I mean we all need it, but like
Mm-hmm.
those who most
Yes.
need it, um you know I feel like the relationship in those in the household will be more like, I don't know,
Sí.
calmado.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know there's some people who goes through a lot of back and forth with like the member, and that is the reason, because you don't understand the other person, and that person's condition is out of their hands.
Absolutely, yes. And it goes the same for like, everyone listening. It's the same not just
Mhm.
with, you know, mommy's bipolar disorder, but it's the same for any
Mhm.
condition. And whether it be
Mhm.
anxiety, depression, if you have
Mhm.
panic attacks, um, whatever
Mhm.
that looks like for you, it's the same
Mhm.
thing. The more we understand, like you said, the more those
Mhm.
relationships will also be better because we're able to
Yeah.
relate and we're able to understand each other better.
Exactly. And then one of the questions that I wanted to ask you now that you talk about this is like, how does mental illness look on a like everyday basis, from like a more clinical diagnose? Because I know, like for example, I had, like I said, after uh, the experience that I went with, I have never been to a therapist again,
Okay.
But like I told you before, um, now after years now trying to learn more about mental health, I know instances in my life that I have my um experience some type of mental, illness. That now I see it, but I have never gone diagnosed, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So like, how does those things look like, like an everyday basis mental illness, or in a more clinical diagnosed? And for those out there like that might, I mean resources for a therapist is very expensive sometimes. So does it affect if you get self-diagnosed, or how does that
Yeah, that's great, I think, to highlight, because that I think that's where it starts, right? Like the whole
work? Mm-hmm.
misconception around. So there's mental health, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
like our physical health, and then there's mental
Mm-hmm.
illness. And I hate that word. I hate mental
Mm-hmm.
illness. The word. I like to
Mm-hmm.
use mental condition because I just feel like illness
Okay.
is just so like I don't know, but so there's like
Okay.
mental health, and then there's mental conditions. So
Mm-hmm.
and this is so I am not I don't do clinical work, so I'm not like a social worker
Mm-hmm.
therapist, but I know
Mm-hmm.
in research and just
Mm-hmm.
in general, mental health versus mental conditions, right? So
Mm-hmm.
mental conditions or illnesses are those require that clinical diagnosis, and typically
Mm-hmm.
those are when the mental um, like the behaviors that we experience
Mm-hmm.
mentally, emotionally, psychologically, when these behaviors start to impact and affect our day to day life. So that's when we start
Mm-hmm.
seeing the changes in our behaviors, where let's say the big one that we tend to see is like when there are changes in behaviors. So, like, let's say you're sleeping way too
Mm-hmm.
much, or you're not sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not and let's say that's not your normal, right? Where you
Mhm.
notice your sleep changing. Also eating, where you're like
Mhm.
either eating too much or you're eating less than what you normally would.
Mhm.
These are different behaviors that maybe we may not even realize are happening. And
Mhm.
so, which is another reason, going back to our initial point, the importance of talking about it, because sometimes we
Mhm.
don't, we're just living day to day, in the hustle and the bustle, working,
Mhm.
school, whatever that may be, taking care of kids, being there for our parents, and we may not even realize that
Mhm.
these things are happening. I know for me personally, I've noticed that, and it takes for someone close to like point out like, hey, I
Mhm.
noticed, this is a little bit off. And then you're able to like take a step back and like self reflect and say,
Mhm.
wait, you're right. And
Mhm.
so that's more on like mental illness conditions, right? So then
Mhm.
mental health, it's
Mhm.
just like our physical health. So it's where
Mhm.
what do we do day to day to make ourselves feel good emotionally, psychologically,
Mhm.
socially. Um, so it's like, what small steps can we take today? So that's like self care, whatever self care looks
Mhm.
like to you. Um, just like if, like if you have like high blood pressure, right? People who have high blood pressure, they have to
Mhm.
take a medication every day, a pill every day to monitor
Mhm.
that, right? So it's like, what are we gonna do? What dose of self care, self love are we gonna indulge
Mhm.
in today to make sure that we feel good mentally? So that's the really
Mhm.
the main differences between like mental health in general,
Mhm.
and then when it comes to mental conditions, mental illness. Mm-hmm.
Condition. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I didn't know you didn't like that word.
No, it's okay. It's
But
That's just me. I always say that. It's just I just feel like there's such a negative connotation around that
mhm.
word, and I feel like that the language around many of the things we
Mhm.
talk about when it comes to this subject of mental health and the
Mhm.
mind. I know it'll, I feel it. The atmosphere is changing now
Mhm.
in society, and
Mhm.
but yeah, that's just a word that I feel like has such a negative ring to it. So, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I get it now that I read it. Like, it does have a like bad connotation to it, so I totally
Mm-hmm,
understand that. But it is very like important to know those difference because I personally didn't know that until right now, like you're explaining it. Also because I tend to say this a lot of when it comes to what's it called, media has a lot to do of how we perceive a person with mental health. And why I say this is because um, I studied film, and then going to film school, they make you watch like a tons of movies,
mm-hmm.
and even in my data. Sometimes you just like to watch movies and enjoy, I don't know, movies and shows and TV shows, right? But when a person is like like has a mental condition, or like has is going through a serious mental health, they always have like this tons of medication, and they're always making them look like they're going to lose
Yes,
their mind.
yes,
And like I feel like when you see in that, like when someone tells you, oh, like you might have, like like friends looking for friends, like, hey, you need to like look, no estás comiendo como antes, like, are you doing well, like, because people can tell. And then like have you thinking, as a type of depression, or like just friends asking, they might see that like I'm not looking that person, just because personally I feel the media has a lot of influence in society and how we perceive others and how we perceive our condition and how we like interact with others. So I have seen that in the environmental of media, that we might not know that how we see each others when it comes to these topics is because based on like a
yes,
movie or based on the show that we saw.
absolutely. Yes, Alejandra. I was recording a
Mhm.
another podcast, maybe a few months ago,
Mhm.
right? And I was talking to them about my
Mhm.
story, the founding story behind Que Paso Latinx, with regards
Mhm.
to my mom. And so
Mhm.
I was telling them the part of where she would seek the help, and she would end up in the psychiatric hospital, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the
Mhm.
podcast hosts, she wanted me to like explain more on what that looked like, because in her mind she said that,
Mhm.
and I guess like you said, it has to do with the media, where she said that
Mhm.
in her mind she pictured like my mom in the hospital in one of the straight jackets, like the white straight jackets that they have the people in,
Yeah, like
like
that.
that.
Mhm.
And that's absolutely not what
Mhm.
it looks like. Absolutely not. It's really like, at least
Mhm.
like I know that the hospital where she has gone for many years, and we were actually just there today.
Mhm.
I was at an appointment with her, and it is so
Mhm.
serene, so peaceful. They have like this nice campus with like grass and flowers. And
Mhm.
when she has been hospitalized in the past, they have different group
Mhm.
sessions where they can um, speak to each other. They write poetry, they do arts and crafts. It's absolutely not
Mhm.
that, but that's what the media
Not
portrays.
that.
That's what the media
Mhm.
portrays. So,
Yep.
of course, that's what people are going to think. And so, you're absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm. Well, right now that you said like about the little white stripes, I just remember las novelas that they always at the end of every novela they will have someone in that
Exactly,
like
you
that.
see, and that's like, imagine. That's why people think that,
Mm-hmm.
that stigma with que son locos o que están
Mm-hmm.
locas, because that's what's portrayed,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's really sad. Like, and I feel like we don't take a second to realize how media influence other like so much in our lives. So that's why like I always try to incorporate the media when it comes to topic like this, because that way we can see like, oh, it actually that's not what a real like life looks like. Is honestly is from the media, just metiendo las cositas en la
See.
cabeza, and I know sometimes it might not be in that way, but because it has been repeatedly being normalized on the environmental of like the media, how to portray someone. Like if like for example, someone write about the person is battling with mental health, depression, stuff like that, they will assume that it will be like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm just saying from a point of view of writers, directors, and all that. But I'm just saying like that's what like they would just assume that, and in reality that's not the case. And another thing that I really wanted to ask you, and then I mean this is the whole conversation and we can talk, I mean, days for
Yes.
this is how to start incorporating and normalizing talks about mental health in our household, because I feel like I mean maybe like in my family is it has been easy talking with my mom and like have this conversation, but I think about all those family who are close minded, you know, like they just don't want to accept sometimes, or like if you have a very close minded dad or uncle or abuela, abuelo, tío, tía, lo que sea, cousin, how can we start normalizing? Like not from or like a very like more like professional, but like just like a normal talk between like family
Mm-hmm.
members. How can we start doing that?
So for me, so like I know with like personally with my dad, I've with the advocacy that I do, right, and sharing our story.
Mm-hmm.
And before, I used to have a blog, Que Paso Latina,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I really started advocating for mental health. And I was sharing a lot about our story. And then I would start to tell my dad, that I was doing this and putting it out there. And he was like, ay, mija, ¿por qué estás haciendo eso? Que todo el mundo va a saber de lo que hablo. I'm like, pa, I'm like, pa, todo el mundo también sí pasan por estas cosas, mentally. We, like I said, we
Mm-hmm.
all go through these things mentally. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, I guess that the way it looked for me starting that conversation was telling my dad, like we all go through this. But I think that in general, being able to start that conversation with just like a simple, like, oh, ¿cómo te sientes hoy? Like, how are you feeling? Or
Mm-hmm.
if you notice that somebody is acting a little, indifferent, um, just
Mm-hmm.
give, asking that simple question like, oh, how's it been going? Like, is everything, all right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where it starts. Sometimes, like, we just live in this. in this culture of like always just working and going and doing this, and
Mhm.
we're always so busy, right? And so sometimes that's all somebody needs is to
Mhm.
be asked, like, how are you doing? How are you doing? ¿Cómo te sientes hoy? Um, if you see someone's acting a little off, like, what can I do to help you feel a little better? Even something like that can
Mhm.
turn someone's day upside down and make them feel great.
Mhm.
So I think starting small is always, that's what I say always, is starting small with like those simple things, because there's no way that you can, um, because of the stigmas, right, that exist, there's no way that we can just start the
Mhm.
conversation off with like, okay, I think you should see a therapist, or vice versa, whichever way it's going,
Mhm.
if the conversation's like the other way around, because I don't think that's really realistic. So
Mhm.
starting small,
Mhm.
asking those, regular questions that sometimes day to day we just overlook, and we really don't, we take for granted those small things that
Mhm.
are so simple to do.
Yeah, and it is very true. Like with the "cómo estás?" So, like I I work at McDonald's in the mornings, and I often say myself that I always ask the customer, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" I always get like so many, how you doing? How's your day going? Because I feel like I'm the first person in the morning that they see before they grab their coffee.
Uh-huh.
So I don't want to have that like it. But
Yes.
you will be surprised how many people will tell you their life story in a drive-through. And I have learned this so much. And even like family members, like, how do you know that you don't have a lot of time? You'll be surprised how many stories I have felt like people who like animals just have died and then nobody have asked
Oh
them that
no.
question. How you feeling? And they just drop
Yes.
in tears. And I'm like, do you want your receipt? Like, I am sorry for laughing
Oh
right
my
now, but like,
gosh. No, no,
like,
no.
you know what I
It's so
mean? Like,
true.
but it like yeah, so I feel like we go, like you said, in a life where, especially here in the United States, that everything is working,
Mm-hmm.
doing something, moving everywhere, and we never take the time to ask each other, how you doing, how you feeling today, like, you know what I mean? Because it might be the person had a good day, it might be the person's got a bad day, or the person's going for something completely, like that is transforming their life, in a positive or negative way. I saw this a lot last year when we went to lockdown. How many people just went through the usual customers running around, and they would just, I was like, oh, how you doing today? And they would just like, I lost my job, like this, that, like I can't get unemployment, like all those little things. And I'm asking you, as just someone helping a crew, like it's helping someone in a restaurant, a fast food restaurant, because it's super fast. So I feel like if I'm not saying that like, oh, I'm making a huge difference, but if those people can get asked from their family members more often, I don't feel they will feel the pressure to like, oh, completely like, you will be surprised how many like usual customer that have just stopped and told me the entire story, how they felt
Yes,
that day,
yes.
just because of the needing of conversation, the needing of someone actually asking them how they're feeling. And another thing that I do wanted to point out that you actually mentioned that I really like is how, um when we were talking about this clinic, psychiatric clinic, how like we always feel like, oh, they're like wrapping these
Mm-hmm.
white things and all stuff, and reality is not that, like how they're poetry painting. And that's where, like a lot of things come through. Like I feel like a welcome, and then repeat it again. The media have portrayed us that the only way to heal ourselves, but the only way to take care of our mind is through medication or through going to these extreme things,
Yes.
right? But reality is not. How, like how you said, like a self-love, like self-care, like, like take a bath with bubbles, I don't know,
Yes.
drink wine, I don't
Uh-huh.
know, do your makeup, go
Oh
run,
yes.
paint, draw,
Mm-hmm.
all those things. Those are taking care of your mental health, but we don't see it that way. They all, like, you know what I mean? Like when someone tells you like, oh, where were you saying dancing or other thing, like I feel like we actually don't appreciate it once when we actually do it, and then second, we don't see it as those are actually, um what's it called, process or items that you can do. I don't know what was the word, I'm forgetting the word, but those are actually I don't know. What is the word? I God,
Like,
I forgot the word. What I want to. But those are actually things that you can do to be in the more peace,
yes.
with your mind and with yourself.
And there are things that you can probably do for free, right? Because we were talking, you
Mhm.
mentioned access, right? Within the Latinx
Mhm.
community, a lot of us don't have that access, whether it be because of insurance, because, unable to
Mhm.
afford it, because, or even if you can afford insurance, there's a lot of times there's a long wait list for therapists, especially right now with the
Mhm.
whole pandemic. And that's really,
Mhm.
so these are the small things that we can do when we don't have access to therapists, like if we really
Mhm.
intentionally and purposely do these things for the betterment of our mental health, for our,
Mhm.
ways of, loving ourselves, caring for ourselves, being more aware of how we feel. um,
Mhm.
that's, those are ways that we can,
Mhm.
do take care of our mental health without having to, you know seek, therapy. Not saying that, if you don't that you don't need professional help, because we all may at some
Mhm.
point. um,
Mhm.
but if you feel that you can manage without having to seek a professional, these are small things that we can do
Mhm.
while we're in that hustle and bustle of working. And in the middle of
Mhm.
the day, taking 5 minutes to just, like, even doing, like, practicing, like, a breathing technique for anxiety, or whatever
Mhm.
that looks like you said, going for a run, a walk.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and even meditation. I
Yes.
have an app in my phone. I downloaded meditation, and I remember doing it the first time. Oh my god, it felt amazing. After that, I do it every day because it's like I never took the time to like close my eyes. Me pongo en el sillón que nadie me moleste
Huh?
with my earphones, and I just relax, and you just feel your body relax because I do a lot of stress. I don't know. I get stressed because una mosca se pasó. I get stressed, so like I get stressed so
Okay.
easily. So meditation, trying to like relax muscles of my everything has helped me a lot. So that doesn't like it was really good when I heard you saying, because like most of us was like, oh, cosas, depresión, pues tienes que ir al terapista. You know what I mean?
Right.
And no, it's not, actually is not that. It's creating things that makes you feel more at peace with yourself, like toda completa. So yeah, so thank you, for sharing all of that. Also, I wanted to talk about Que Paso Latinx, because I know you said you started from a blog, right?
Yes.
And now it's a nonprofit.
Hmm.
Yeah. So had the idea, or like, I mean, I know it started from your mom, and then all the learning that you have done through the years, but like how this nonprofit together from the blog to the now nonprofit started, and why, like, I know we know what advocating for mental health is so important, but like as of right now, especially like I said, like right now in 2021, why it's so necessary to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So Que Paso Latinx is, my nonprofit, which, we
Mm-hmm.
formalized the work as an official nonprofit last May. So we'll be a year this May.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yay.
I know, right? So I started through a blog which I had, which was called Que Paso Latina. And I started that a few
Mm-hmm.
years ago. And I started that because I needed an outlet, right? Like we were just talking about all these
Mm-hmm.
different ways that we can, um, take care of ourselves, express ourselves to make us feel good and feel at
Mm-hmm.
peace, right? So I started this because I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to let out how I felt. So I did this through writing, and I did it through my blog. So I started
Mm-hmm.
sharing it and online through my website, and then, um, I found that I started having these conversations, and I started, so ¿Qué pasó Latina? Because I wanted to talk about, you know, lo que le pasó a esta Latina, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but then I
Yeah.
started noticing, like, I was going out, and even just like being at, the bar, hanging out with friends, or
Mm-hmm.
even at work, I was starting to have these conversations in person with, like, everybody. like they started to see that I was talking about it through my writing, and
Mhm.
they started opening and having these conversations with me simply because I was writing and advocating about it through my blog. So
Mhm.
I hosted a few events while I was writing the blog here in my hometown of Yonkers, and one was for BIPOC mental health awareness month. Then I did
Mhm.
a few events for World Mental Health Day, October 10th. And
Mhm.
so I noticed that people wanted to have this conversation, and it was like, let's talk.
Mhm.
So I thought to myself, I said, like, I want to be able to scale this conversation and really just make it bigger and really create more of an impact. And so I
Mhm.
thought that the best way to do that would um, be to formalize the work through an official nonprofit. And so that's what I decided to do at the top of 2020. It was like right before the pandemic hit, and then the pandemic
Mhm.
hit, and then, I
Mhm.
mean, that happened. But we had
Mhm.
to,
Yeah.
So, but behind our mission with Que Paso Latinx
Mhm.
is to destigmatize mental health through healing, conversations, and culture by educating and empowering the community. So I spoke to you
Mhm.
earlier about the um, the way I my passion for mental health was born, which was through one, it was through my mom and learning about her condition, right?
Mhm.
And then it was really through that education that I
Mhm.
learned along the way, because that's really what changed everything for me. Like I said, it healed my life. Just
Mhm.
knowing and learning, even just very little too, just something as
Mhm.
simple as knowing what her bipolar disorder was, what knowing what anxiety is, knowing what depression is.
Mhm.
So for me, I feel through Que Paso Latinx, it's mental health education is what we're focusing on, because, and
Mhm.
especially within the youth, because that's where it starts. And I know for me, if at that young age I would have had someone say, hey, look, this is what bipolar disorder is. These are the symptoms, these are the behaviors, this is what will happen, and this is what you can do to take care of yourself, number one, and then also
Mhm.
have a better relationship with her. So that's what we
Mhm.
are bringing to our youth. We're starting here in Yonkers. Our first program
Mhm.
will launch in the fall. And so we're focusing on mental health education. So we're completely non clinical. So it's really
Mhm.
finding the small pasos that we can all take. So our
Mhm.
tagline is mental health first, one paso at a time. So literally everything we just spoke about
Mhm.
on this episode
Yeah.
is, those small pasos, those small things that we can take, that we can do day to day to take care of ourselves mentally, right?
Mhm.
Because like you said, right now it's really taking care of our mental health is like seeing a therapist or
Mhm.
being on medications. And so that's
Mhm.
really, that's like at the core of what we believe at Que Paso Latinx, is that we have to find these small ways in which we can manage day to day. And so we plan
Mhm.
to bring this through the culture. So like we were speaking earlier, like if we can incorporate this through la cultura, and we can show our community that this is completely normal, we all go through these things,
Mhm.
then we're able to debunk mental health in a way, and like start to eliminate that stigma,
Mhm.
because we're just incorporating it
Yeah.
into our normal things that we do. So like we spoke about dancing.
Mhm.
We plan to host our first event next month for mental health awareness month, or actually this is going to air right during mental health awareness month. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so
Yeah.
um we plan to host that, dancing and mental health. And so this is something so simple, but it has a huge impact
Mhm.
on our mental well-being. And so
Mhm.
through the culture, whether it be cooking, through music, through art, these are the
Mhm.
things which we're gonna push mental health through that culture and through the education. So that's what we're about at Que Paso Latinx. And it's really, like I said, focusing on the education, because and within our youth,
Mhm.
because if we're able to do that, then it starts there, right? And then this next generation
Mhm.
coming up will already have this different mindset when it comes to mental health, right?
Yep. Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I think it's I mean, I really appreciate the work that you do with Que Paso Latinx and incorporating the youth because I mean, sometimes not saying all the time, but sometimes we think about our mental health like from or point to up, but what about the generation that are coming? What about the resources for them? That way they don't have to go through what we
Yes,
did.
exactly.
uh,
Exactly.
yeah, so I'm really like I'm really happy to hear that you're incorporating the youth and to incorporate in la cultura because and then when you were saying that like cooking because like our moms or tias they're always cooking and stuff like that. So I mean that connection I mean I'm just thinking right now like cooking a veces navidad se ponen a cocinar todas juntas. This I feel like that's a way to release emotions and just connect with other people. So I feel like knowing and then I know that people in your hometown and maybe outside of your hometown soon can benefit from it,
Yes.
that to know that it's normal, to know that we can do little things, como dijiste, como what's it, mental health un
Yeah,
paso
yeah,
at a
mental
time.
health first, one paso at a time.
Okay. Okay, yeah, like that, like just little step, baby steps, como le
Uh-huh.
dicen. And this is like for every age,
See?
like from young, adulto, or like, aunque ya estén, nuestros abuelitos, sometimes they, I feel like they have so much in their, or like in those
Oh,
shoulders
see.
sometimes.
Mhm.
And so I think it's a very good way to incorporate everybody. So, yeah, this episode is going to air on yeah, what is on what's it called? May, so it's mental health. So when is your event that way if someone is listening that lives close by can go?
Yeah, so we are shooting for May 22nd. Um, so we
Mm-hmm.
don't have the date finalized yet, but that's the date we're shooting for, just waiting
Mm-hmm.
for a few things to be confirmed. But that's most likely the date
Mm-hmm.
for the event.
Yay! Yeah, I'm so excited. I was we were talking about this event before recording, and I was like, where can I join?
I know.
So if you live close, yeah, if you live close by, please go check it out. It's about salsa and mental health. So let's
Mhm.
like dance a little bit. But yeah, do you want to say anything else before I close it? Anything?
I just wanted to say thank you. And I mean, like I said, I'm always advocating for mental health first, one paso at a time, because that's
Mm-hmm.
really all we have. We have to really
Mm-hmm.
focus on being in the moment, in the present,
Mm-hmm.
not living in the past, not living in the future, which is anxiety, living in the past being
Mm-hmm.
depression.
Yeah.
And so, really focusing on the now, being present, and working on what we can do today, one step at a
Mm-hmm.
time, like you said, baby steps. And I'll just share like one of my favorite quotes that I love saying.
Mm-hmm.
um, so it's be kind, because everyone is going through a mental battle that you know nothing about. Because that's so true, right? We're all going through something mentally,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't need to know what others are going through, right? Because we're all,
Mm-hmm.
we're all so different, and that's what makes us all so special.
Yeah.
But like you said, in the morning, you're the first person a lot of people may interact with grabbing their coffee. And
Mm-hmm.
just that smile that you give them, or that,
Mm-hmm.
hey, how you doing today? No matter how quick it is, that can change
Mm-hmm.
someone's day and, turn it around. So
Yeah.
it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the quote. That is so so true. And for everybody that is listening, please every single thing que pasó, everything will be linked down below on the episode notes. Also, just make sure this is the first episode of the series. So we're going to have like another episode next week, which is about trauma and healing. So we have a panel that Maria is going to be there too. It's going to be on May 29th at 1:30 Pacific Standard Time, which all the detail for that event is going to be down below. If you have any questions about mental health, I would really, really appreciate you. You can send them in the link below under questions too. We'll be answering all of them in the panel. So thank you, Maria. thank you. I really appreciate all your knowledge, and thank you for sharing the story of your mom, the story and how you learned everything, and to bringing all those knowledge that you have brought, like acquired through the years, through our community, because we do need it. And then I feel like years like the years to come, we'll see a more in a community more open about mental health.
Yes.
And I'm really hopeful of
Right.
that.
I know. Me too. Me too.